So how do you write a sad scene? After watching the film Inside Out, I've come to believe that the emotions of sadness and joy are the two most important emotions in life and also in storytelling. And so how do you create the same level of sadness that films like Inside Out or Interstellar or Up create? If you were to take my top 10 scenes from any story ever, probably most of them would be sad scenes. And it's undeniable the effect a sad scene can have on a story as a whole. And so here are the 5 tips on how to write a sad scene. But if you're new here and you love stories and storytelling tips, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell and I'll keep you updated with future videos. Tip number 1 is to create a high level of injustice. This, I believe, is the foundation of sadness. It is the thing that literally creates sadness. Injustice. Basically, a very simple definition of injustice is a very bad thing happening to a very good person. And so if you can do that in your story, then you basically created sadness. But here are just a few tips to do that, to create that high level of injustice. And so the first tip is probably the most common way that sadness is created, and that is through death scenes. Basically, a character who the reader has grown to know and like dies, and who really didn't deserve their death, and whose death was very unfair. Usually a character who has noble intentions, and because of those intentions he undergoes risks to reach his goal, and because of that he perhaps achieves his goal, but he dies in the process. Examples are in A Monster Calls or Up. These scenes leave us just feeling kaput. The sense of injustice is completely overwhelming. The characters who died completely don't deserve it. The characters' deaths has a more profound effect on the people who are still alive afterwards because they have to deal with the grief of the character's death. I've created a video, it should be here, maybe it isn't, I don't know. I'll leave it in the description about how to kill your characters in the best possible way. So the third tip, and how to create injustice, is to create a character that is subject to a very unfair fate. You don't often think about this, but actually Gollum has been subject to a very unfair fate. He didn't really choose to see the ring, and he didn't choose for the power of Sauron to completely take over his mind, and he didn't choose 500 years of complete misery. I mean, of course he had an element of choice because he could technically say no to the ring, but once the ring had gotten hold of him there was almost no way that he could have resisted it. There are scenes when he's battling in his mind and he's actually trying to be a better hobbit and he's trying to be good again, but of course the ring is more powerful, and so you have a huge sense of injustice because he's going through so much that he really doesn't want. And so of course you might see him as a slimy worm-like creature who is just creepy, but there's part of him that wants to be good. Or if a character is wrongly put in prison and they didn't even deserve it. The Shawshank Redemption, IMDb's top film of all time. And the fourth tip is to create a high level of regret, which is basically where the character is looking back on their life and they are regretting the things that they have used their life for. For example, a terrible father who looks back on his life and sees how much pain he has caused his family, for example beating his children, and he suddenly realizes that he's a horrible person. Or in Interstellar, when he realizes that he could have spent his entire life with his daughter Murph, instead he spent 30 years in space where she was growing up through her childhood, and so this creates so much injustice for his daughter Murph because she basically had to grow up without his father simply because he wanted to go on his space mission. Or in Schindler's List, when he realizes that he could have given his possessions for more money to save more people's lives who would have died in concentration camps. So he's looking back in regret of actions that he could have taken differently in the past that would have created a better future and a better present for him right now. And the truly sad thing about Schindler is that he felt regret even though he really shouldn't have felt regret, because he did so much good and he saved hundreds of people, and because of that he really shouldn't be feeling the pain of regret. So that is another level of injustice that adds to the sadness that is already in the scene. So the fifth tip is to think about what makes you sad and then to write about it. Think about all the times when you've cried. Think about all those times when you've been at your lowest point, and think about the elements that went into you feeling as sad as you did. Basically think about why you felt so sad. Write the same elements that made you feel sad, because if it makes you feel sad then it'll probably make other people feel sad, because we're all people. Of course we're different. but we're all basically the same thing. And so what makes you sad will probably make other people feel sad. And a bonus tip is if you kill your characters, to get your readers emotionally invested in the characters before you kill them. The most powerful deaths always come at the end of stories because the reader has had the whole story to basically get to know the characters intimately. And it's almost as if you knew the characters personally and then they died. It's almost as if a friend has actually died. When I was in secondary school, my favorite teacher died and I was incredibly sad. Of course I cried because I was so emotionally invested in that teacher because he was my favorite teacher. But if a teacher had died who wasn't my favorite teacher, then I probably wouldn't have been so sad. It doesn't make me a horrible person, it's just natural, because of course you love your best friend or your wife or your husband more than you do a random stranger. And so the better your readers know your characters, the more emotional the death will be. So here's a quick summary of the 6 tips on how to write a sad scene. The first thing is the foundation of sadness, which is to create a huge level of injustice. Basically something incredibly unfair happening to someone who doesn't deserve it at all. So how do you create this injustice? The second tip is to do this through death scenes of characters who really didn't deserve it. The third tip is to create a character who's subject to a completely unfair fate that they haven't deserved. For example, someone going to prison unjustly, or Gollum's fate with the ring. And the fourth tip is to create a high level of regret where the characters look back at their past and realize all the things that they could have done differently that would have made their life and other people's lives much, much better. The fifth tip is to think about what makes you sad and write about that, because what makes you sad will probably make someone else sad as well. The sixth tip is to get your readers emotionally invested in your characters before you kill them, because you care more about things that you've spent more time with. So those are my 6 tips. If you enjoyed, give it a like and comment what is your favorite sad scene that you've ever read or watched, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye. And then it got into your blood.
The effect. Oh, I can feel it already.
Oh yeah. But you gotta die seriously, not just be happy.
Oh dang.
Oh dang.
What a shame, I'm dying.
Oh whoa. Whoa, you're dying?
I died. I'm okay, but I'm dead.
Whoa! It's supposed to be a B-roll about friends, and they're interacting, and they're getting to know each other, and then they die, and it's even more painful because they're friends.
Oh, okay, so I guess I should die.